We all want to experience more joy in our lives, and in this video, I'm going to explain to you how you can quiet the ego in order to be happier more often. What's up, beautiful? It's Lisa Roulette, and if you're new to the channel, thank you for joining me today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so that you know when I release a new video. The whole channel is dedicated to helping you heal and create a life you love. Today we're talking about more joy by quieting the ego. And the ego is a really big subject that's oftentimes misunderstood. So if you don't know much about the ego, this is going to be a good video for you, because without understanding what the ego is, it's going to be very challenging to quiet it for more joy. So let's dive in by talking about what the primary role or the function of the ego is. It had, back in the day when it first developed, a very pure intention. And the intention was to individuate, authenticate, or separate so that you could understand who you were in relation to the rest of the world. And as you begin to understand who you are in relation to the rest of the world, you start to get to know your strengths, your weaknesses, what powers you have, and where you need to improve in order to expand into the fullness of who you are. The problem with the ego is that as it begins to individuate and separate from everything around it, it also begins to label and judge other things in the external world along with you in your internal world. This becomes problematic because those labels and judgments become very painful over time. Now, the first layer of the ego is comprised of those labels and judgments that begin at a very young age. For instance, when you were in elementary school, it's very likely that you sat between two individuals who you labeled and judged, not necessarily harshly, but you placed labels and judgments on them in order to understand who you were as separate of them. So on your left may have been a young black-skinned girl who had absolutely perfectly smooth skin, and on your right may have been a girl with the perfect curls and ribbons that you never even dreamed were possible to find anywhere in the world. And so when you went home, potentially, you looked in the mirror and said, oh, I've got all these freckles, my scraggly hair doesn't look as pretty, I've got this crooked nose, and all of a sudden you're starting to label and judge things in order to define yourself in your authentic nature against the rest of the world. Problematic, because these labels and judgments are also harsh criticisms that leave us in pain. So the first layer of the ego is when we start to label and judge ourselves and the world around us. Hit me up in the comments below if you know that you are labeling and judging a lot of things, but do not worry, do not fret, and do not fear, because it is just that pesky ego that is slowly going to fall away the more you understand what it's doing and why it exists in the first place. The second layer of the ego is when all of those labels and judgments begin to accumulate en masse, or they become a body of pain, which we know as the pain body. So as we age, all of the labels and judgments form almost like a reservoir or a pool of pain that embodies our awareness to the point that we can call it a pain body. We keep those memories of the labels and judgments, the very things that authenticate us and individuate us from the rest of the world around us, in the subconscious and the unconscious minds, and that pain runs continuously like a broken record, leaving us feeling relatively unworthy, undeserving, unlovable, and sometimes as if we're not enough to have the joy that is natural and organic to our heart center. So what we're trying to understand in this video is how to move from the egoic mental faculty or the mind into that heart center that is significantly more powerful, where all of your organic joy is located. Now, if you're super fluent in the pain body, please leave me a comment below. I would love to hear your perspective, because sometimes your perspective can change someone's life. So you commenting below could actually help heal another's pain body. But the ego doesn't just stop at the pain body. Since it is a very intelligent system, it organizes the pain body into the third and final layer of the ego, and that is the houses of the ego. And I'm going to encourage you to do your own research on the houses of the ego, because it is potentially a whole nother video. But two of the predominant houses that many of us live in are the house of addiction and the house of the victim. Now, the house of addiction is pretty easy to understand, so I'll use that as reference. We can be addicted to really anything. We can be addicted to substance, to food, to fitness, to our work. We can even be addicted to our spiritual practice, where we need something external of us to feel joy. Now, the problem with this is that when we need something external to us to provide us joy, then when we are without it, we can't find that joy. And this is a very inorganic way of approaching joy. We don't want to remain in the houses of the ego, because when we're in the houses of the ego, our worldview, or the way we see the world around us, is shaped via the lens of the window of the house. So every time we look through the lens of the window of the house, we label and judge it according to what house we're in. So if we're in the house of addiction, then we know that our joy is only going to be located in what we are addicted to. Again, that can be substance, that can be fitness, that can be food, that can be overthinking, that can be overworking, that can be a commitment to spiritual practice so much so that it interferes with other aspects of your life. The house of addiction is extremely common, and we inherit a lot of that from our ancestors, so we want to be very careful. But the house of the victim is also very common, whereby we begin to think of ourselves as less than, and all of the pain body becomes the victim's cloak, or the burden through which we travel the rest of our lives. So how do we step out of the ego, quiet the ego, and really find that organic joy? Well, we step out of the houses. And when we step out of the houses of the ego, we come into this neutral territory. And in that neutral territory is where the awareness of non-separation is. It is the present moment awareness of the vast interconnectedness of our reality. It is the knowing of the one. And when we can understand that we are all one and an integral, interwoven part of one another, we begin to understand how very important our healing is. Because as we heal the labels and judgments and the pain body at large, and we dismantle the houses of the ego, what we're doing is we're raising our frequency. We're transcending our wounds. And as we transcend our wounds, we begin to create from the knowingness that we are lovable, we are deserving, we are worthy, we are powerful, and we are more than enough to exist in a joyful state despite our external situations and circumstances, and more importantly, despite our history, the history that runs in that subconscious and that unconscious as part of the pain body, as part of all of the labels and judgments we give the world around us and we give ourselves. So if you can step out of the houses of the ego and actively heal that pain body by letting go of the judgments and the labels and the harsh criticisms that are no longer necessary to hold, you're going to find you come right back into this present moment, and that joy becomes innate to our everyday practice of both healing and creating. Quieting the ego is big business, but now that you're aware of the 3 layers of the ego, you can be mindful about when each layer is building and playing out. And as often as possible, I ask you to step out of those houses of the ego and simply reflect on the one. You can't do that unless you stay super duper present. So make sure that you have time each day for a mindfulness or meditation practice. Now, if you have any questions about what you learned in this video, make sure you comment below and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Also, if you'd like me to discuss something in future videos, by all means, let me know in the comments. In the meantime, never forget that you are loved.